So welcome to everyone viewing and welcome to Jack. I'll first introduce myself. My name's Ben Foley. I'm an activist supporting the Arise Festival, and today I'm joined by Jack Sargeant, who's the Welsh Labour Senedd member for Allen and Deeside. Today's discussion is part of the Arise Festival. It's a festival of left ideas, and after the successes of Mark Drakeford and Welsh Labour at the 2021 Senedd elections, and also with Welsh Labour really kind of dominating Labour's local election gains in 22, I think it's a good opportunity to hear a bit more about Welsh Labour and Welsh Government, and hear from one of the sort of newer and younger elected reps in the Senedd. So Jack, I've got a few questions I'll run through, but is there anything you want to say to just introduce yourself very briefly at the start?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Ben. This is a great opportunity to be able to speak to like-minded individuals and groups of people with the ideas that are needed for the future of not only Wales but the United Kingdom. So it's a great honour to be able to have this discussion today, and hopefully we'll just touch on some of the bold proposals from Welsh Labour and of course under the leadership of Mark Drakeford. So really delighted to be here.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll do a mix of kind of your personal experiences and obviously your personal assessments of things that are kind of more the national policies that are being carried out in government. So we'll just kick off personally with you joined the Senedd in 2018, and you were 24 when you did that. But perhaps you want to say a bit about what you did just beforehand, and maybe what it was like joining a body like that at your age, as you were then, and how you found it starting out.
Well, I was the youngest ever. Well, I still am the youngest ever elected member of the Senedd, or the National Assembly as it was. I'm not the youngest at the moment, which is a positive step forward, I think, for the Senedd as an institution. But look, age is a number to me. You know, I represent a number of people in Allen and Deeside, my constituency, but I think as a whole we represent people across Wales, and there is, you know, a younger generation who need to have their voices heard, and why can't it be someone of the younger generation being in elected politics? So, you know, age is just a number. But coming from my background, so look, I'm not the typical, or certainly don't try to be the typical politician, and I try to use that and reflect that in my everyday political journey, if you like. So I started out as an apprentice engineer in a local firm in Allen and Deeside. We're heavily built on manufacturing, so it's, you know, it's a standard route for many, if you like, up in my area. I then went into research and development engineering. So it's not typical of a politician. They're usually very often lawyers or political advisors, but I think it's a good difference, because my job was to find solutions to problems, and that's what I try to embody in my politics. You know, what are the solutions to the challenges we face as a nation, not only in my constituency but as a nation as a whole. So and I think we often find, just because I often say this, and I've made the comments of lawyers or political you know, staffers or so on, which, you know, we also do need, of course. What we often find in politics, I think, is we don't like to fail. And I actually think, you know, I don't want to see failure, but failure is part of continuous improvement. And if we recognise where things aren't going, you know, in a great way, in such as policy implementation and so on, then we can change that and make, you know, we don't have to double down. And sometimes we do that in politics too often. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the Senedd, is my role, using those experiences where I grew up and trained as an engineer and lived and worked as an engineer.
Great, thanks for that opener. So, and this is quite a broad one, but Welsh Labour has obviously been in government since the Assembly was established in '99, when you were probably about 5 or so. So what? So obviously it's remained Labour, whilst Westminster has obviously chopped and changed between, well, it's gone from Labour to Conservative, but Welsh Labour has maintained itself. So what do you think politically has sustained it in power, whilst, you know, Labour has lost power in Westminster?
Well, I think if we look, I mean, it's a remarkable achievement, first and foremost. And, you know, if we look at last year's Senedd elections, where I think it was 23 years of power and we had the best ever result, that manifesto was built on bold ideas and standing up for the people of Wales on that bold manifesto. And we look back to the perhaps early parts of devolution and the work in particular Rhodri Morgan did with his close friend and aide, who is now the First Minister, Mark Drakeford. We have always been unique in Wales and in Welsh Labour, and we've been uniquely Welsh. I think that's a clear point to raise. If I'm right in saying this, Rhodri Morgan used to call it the clear red water in Wales, and he was right with that. And I know Rhodri used to pronounce it in the way he did, and fantastic to watch him do that on many occasions when I was growing up, as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, just starting knocking the doors and leafleting actually with family and so on. But Mark actually wrote that phrase. So I think that's the difference. We've not been afraid to be bold, and when we have been bold, we've also achieved. And I think those are we have delivered for the people of Wales. And of course, we had the best results we've ever had in the Senedd just last year. That followed on again in these local elections this year. So I think, if we continue to win, and I'm clearly hopeful of that, and I'm very optimistic, and I think we will continue to win in Wales, it's because of that uniqueness, it's because of that boldness. And I think we need to protect that in Wales moving forward, and obviously always have that ability to deliver for the people of Wales on those sorts of premises, really.
Great. I think I'll come back to the more recent manifesto in a second, but I just wanted to ask really, what do you think Labour can learn from, and I mean, when I say Labour, what can Labour in the wider UK, both in England and in Scotland, what can be learned from Welsh Labour? And actually, perhaps it'd be interesting to know, what connections do you have with MPs in the Commons or with members of the Scottish Parliament? Do they exist? Do you have that dialogue between you? Or is that something that there could be more of?
Well, look, I think it could always be more of. I have limited my personal, I'm sure the leadership of Welsh Labour and the other leaders of our parties would answer it differently. But my personal experience is in Scotland, I don't particularly have too much communication with elected members of Parliament. I have done hustings and certain things with people who have now been elected, and we perhaps should follow that up with sort of Green New Deal and similar area of policy. So very interesting people. My trade union connections through Unite are probably better with up in Scotland and Unite Scotland. Obviously, we have the PLP, and there is a Welsh group of MPs, a lot less than there were and a lot less than what we would like to see. And I'm hopeful that will change soon. And those connections do happen. And then on a personal level, you'll know, and I'm sure many others will know, I have a close relationship with Beth Winter. I think she's got some great ideas and championing some great ideas. So we've had those personal conversations, and they go a long way to how we shape and have those discussions on policy. But in terms of lessons, I mean, there's one individual really who, if anyone's to learn from, it's the First Minister, isn't it? I mean, he's been around since 1999. He was Rhodri Morgan's advisor. We've talked about the success of Welsh Labour for a whole, and just look at where we've gone now. These are real bold policies coming out of and under Mark's leadership. So I said, look, why talk to Mark? He's clearly has a political brain which is very up there with the best, and don't be afraid to stand on those bold policies that actually, once they are delivered, and we've proved they can be delivered, they solve people's problems. And that's what we do here in Wales, and that would be my suggestion to them. Look at us, and it's not just us, is it? We're talking about Welsh Labour today, but we should also look at where Labour wins in power. Places like Manchester, where in the devolved administration there under Andy Burnham, these are places where we've delivered in a position of power and made those areas better.
Great. I think maybe just one more thing on that before we sort of look at some of these bold policies. Just really clearly there's an ongoing constitutional debate following devolution about the extent of powers, and that's thrown up, obviously in Scotland, that's thrown up the SNP being in government for a long period now. Just on that kind of issue of nationalism, clearly the SNP have established themselves in Scotland, but in Wales, Welsh Labour seems to have kind of had a hold over that, and clearly there is a national identity in Wales that's very strong, but why has Welsh Labour been able to sort of maintain itself and kind of maybe incorporate that into its agenda?
Well, I think it's those, we've stood on a manifesto, haven't we, and we've delivered those bold ideas, that unique Welshness. I have to admit, I don't know the history of Scotland and Scottish politics that well, so I wouldn't be able to talk about constitution. But I think the main thing for Wales, and why we've continued to win and continue to achieve, because when we have been in power, we've delivered for the people of Wales, and I think that's the most important part to a lot of people in Wales, and I'm sure in Scotland. Some people would perhaps disagree with me on that, but a job, or certainly in my opinion, of a job in government is to govern and make people's lives better. We've done that. You look at where we are as well, and how we've tried to sustain power and actually improve the lives of people. You might know, or certainly some viewers may already know, that we have a cooperation agreement at the moment with the third party, SNP's sister party, Plaid Cymru, and that's because we want to deliver an agenda which we both probably believe in. We've come to that agreement, and Mark has delivered that agreement. Free school meals is just one example of what is on that agreement paper, and I'm fully behind this, because again, if that's the way to do things, that's grown-up politics, isn't it? If we're going to, let's not just row about things for argument's sake. I can hear my dog who clearly agrees with this premise as well. But if we are to deliver for the people of Wales, then grown-up politics is the way to do things, and we do that in Wales. I may just try and shut the door just briefly. Give me 2 seconds.
Go for it. Yeah.
See if that makes a slight difference. But yeah, no.
Well, you've mentioned the programme for government and the coalition agreement. So perhaps there's an opportunity to talk about some of those policies, because obviously people in Wales who might be viewing this when we go out may be aware of them, but obviously not many people read long political documents, even if it's in their effects themselves. So, and certainly I think a lot of viewers in England or Scotland won't have seen the detail of the programme for government, which, having read it, I think is a very positive, forward-looking document. So I don't know if there's some of the things you think have stood out from that in terms of what policy winners, or things that you're just looking forward to delivering from the Senedd.
Yeah, great. And I'll pick out a few particular examples which are what I'm proud of, or certainly what I'm looking forward to helping deliver and helping shape in the next 4 years of my time before the next election. And again, it's those, I believe the programme for governments, based on the manifesto that we set in the election, is all about helping the residents of Wales have a better life and have better life chances. But there's a couple of things that I think your viewers to this programme may be interested in. Firstly is the social partnership bill, which has just been laid on the floor of the Senedd, and it's a bill, and I'm again an engineer, I like to find solutions. I don't believe in that we need legislation for legislation's sake, but the social partnership bill it will be a good piece of legislation, which I think as a nation we should be proud of, and other people should be watching closely with how we do that. And that's all about working more closely with our trade union colleagues to instill that fairness at work. We have a great relationship with our trade union colleagues here in Wales. That's a stark difference, isn't it, about the current Conservative governments, who, you know, are an absolute disgrace, and I think we can all agree on that, and simply do not care about the trade union movement. We see at the moment, aren't we, we're in the hottest day, while we're recording this, it's the hottest day in Wales that has ever been, or certainly yesterday was, and today's you know, well up there. We don't have a maximum indoor working temperature, and that's quite frankly ridiculous, isn't it? So, you know, the social partnership bill is something that I'm looking forward to seeing develop and take shape in the Senedd. We just look at another one, re-regulation of the buses and the bus industry. I don't have to go on too much about how Thatcher and the Conservative government in the 80s ruined the industry. We've seen examples of this happening now. Andy Burnham in Manchester, I think Steve Rotherham in Liverpool is looking at doing something similar. My colleague Ken Skates brought this forward, or certainly the idea of this forward, before COVID. It's now being taken forward by another minister. It was something that I'd like to see done quicker, but obviously events have happened, and that's something I think that will bring, you know, our communities will be able to use and have trust and faith in the services that they use, like the important public transport networks. We've took over already the Transport for Wales train service. You know, it's an opportunity as well to bring buses back under public control. Council house building, you know, we scrapped the right to buy. These are really important things, aren't they? You know, social housing stock that provides for people's needs right across our nation. It's the important, one of the things that is important in this is it is the right type of housing, and we listen to our residents of the nation. And then I just want to touch on perhaps my personal favourite, certainly within the programme for government. It's just been launched earlier this month, but that's the basic income trial for care leavers. And look, it was a campaign I fought really hard for in the previous Senedd. I led a debate in the Senedd calling for a trial. We got the support of most members of the chamber from across different parties. Some disagreed, of course, as how they do. That didn't stop there. I then campaigned for that to be in our manifesto. It was, and now we see it being delivered in the programme for government, and 500 care leavers are going to have a real chance in life, a real springboard here, which they perhaps wouldn't have had if we didn't take forward this trial. Granted, it's not a universal basic income trial, but it does offer a few, you know, one, it offers a chance that we trial this properly and we understand how it works in the United Kingdom and in Wales. It also offers those life chances, which is really important, but it's a significant trial. I will give the Welsh Government real credit for that. 500 people will be able to have that £1,600 a month. You know, this is what Labour is about, empower, and it's supporting those people who really do need our help. And so I'm particularly proud of that, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of that in the coming years.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting policy, and I know in the last week or so that there's been a discussion about once the evaluation is done on how successful it's been or what the impact of it's been, there might be a discussion about expanding that out to those employees who are in older sort of heavy industries, to help them transition to into some of the sort of Green New Deal kind of future employment projects we're hoping to see. So it's a really interesting and live discussion, which I think we should all be looking at. I just sort of thought also, I'd know, given you're talking about sort of the role of public transport and public intervention, there's lots of discussion, it seems, or lots of content in the programme for government about public provision of services. So things like a national care service, which I know the Welsh Government's really moving ahead on, things like a public energy company, and a national construction company. I'm not sure how far forward they really are yet, but they're the kind of policy agenda that sound like they could really change society if they get sufficient funding and get up and running in the right way. So I think they're really exciting. I'd perhaps just like to move on to the next question, and that's just to talk about the difficulties we're facing at the moment. And really, it's the cost of living crisis that's affecting the whole of the UK. But as we're talking about this on Tuesday, there's just been a discussion in the Commons on the cost of living crisis in Wales, actually, and Welsh Labour MPs have been getting stuck into that. So I just wondered, given Welsh Government, is somewhat limited by the budget it receives from the Treasury and Westminster, how is the Welsh Government really trying to deal with the cost of living crisis, and is it doing that differently or how is it doing it differently to the Conservatives?
Well, let's be quite frank about this. The cost of living crisis is a Conservative cost of living crisis, and the government in Westminster are doing nothing to support, residents in my constituency and places across the United Kingdom. And that we are doing what we can. There was a cost of living payments. We've clearly within the cooperation agreement as well have set up free school meals starting from September at infant age, and that will be developed throughout. These are all within the lens of a cost of living crisis package to support the people of Wales. But Wales is significantly underfunded. I don't think there's appetite from Westminster to fund us properly. There certainly hasn't been that appetite in the past. I think if we're looking now, there's a Conservative leadership election at the moment, isn't there? I don't think I don't tend to keep a close look on the Conservative leaders, but when I've read and seen stuff online and speaking to other individuals in this, I don't think one contender who's in the final four now, or any of the 11 or however many they had, actually mentioned how they are going to support the devolved administrations in terms of funding and the future relationships, both Scotland and Northern Ireland Executive, and of course Wales. But there's no magic wand for this, is there? If you want to address poverty, then there has to be a fairer tax system in place, and that was something I would like to see. But Wales will continue, and under Mark Drakeford and Welsh Labour, we will continue to do all we can with the limited resource that we have, and that will be, many problems that we see. We talked about public sector, and we've talked a lot today about the re-regulation of bus industries and so on. We want to try and support those individuals. We've seen throughout COVID where, test and trace the programme throughout COVID, we ran that significantly better by using public sector workers, whilst the Conservatives, along with partying, were wasting a load of money on, or certainly providing contracts to their mates. Some of this money could have been put forward to proposals, or if they don't want to do it properly, then give the money to the Welsh Government, and I'm sure we'll implement and support those people. But look, it's a Conservative cost of living crisis. They're not doing enough. Simple as that. We'll do what we can. I mentioned a few things there. There is a vast difference, and I think that vast difference is simply because we care.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Obviously, the Welsh Government is sort of making use of what means it has, and thinking through kind of innovative ways to better fund those on lower incomes. But I guess the other side of it for us as members of the Labour movement are the trade unions obviously going to be taking action. We're seeing a number of actions recently from the RMT and the CWU, although notably I think the RMT wasn't in dispute with Transport for Wales. But I think we're going to see more of that, and I think be interested to know your thoughts on Labour representatives showing their support.
Well, I'm a very proud trade unionist, as some who are on this discussion with us may know, that I was on the picket line on the first day I could be on the picket line with RMT workers in Wales. You're right to say, they weren't on strike and in dispute with the Welsh Government, but it did affect Wales. You know, National Rail is still not devolved, so that's a separate discussion to have. But I'm very much supportive. Can I just say as well that, you know, both the RMT and CWU of late have really shown the power of, you know, the trade union movements and where we see that. And I always say, you know, the best way to protect your living standards and certainly your family's living standards is join the trade union. So I will be back on the picket line if the picket lines happen. I'm fully supportive of members, elected members as well, being there. I think it's a role that we should play. I've been there myself. Just before the recent events, we had a strike action and a ballot for industrial action in my local Arriva branch. I was on the picket line there, and I believe that's what we should do. We should stand in solidarity with those who you know, deserve better paying conditions. So yeah, fully supportive of the trade union movement and the activists who support it.
Great. Okay. One more, I guess, kind of maybe sort of meaty subject, but we've obviously recently seen discussion in between Welsh Labour and Plaid, and obviously a recall conference of Welsh Labour talking about reforming the Senedd, enlarging it, changing the constituencies, and how members of it are elected. Good to get some of your thoughts on that, and why it's being pursued, and what it will mean.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think the history of devolution in Wales shows a number of proposals for a larger Senedd or National Assembly. As it was, we have 60 members at the moment. That is the smallest of the devolved administrations in the United Kingdom. And, you know, we're quite frank about this. We barely see councils anywhere in the United Kingdom have less members than we do here. I spoke in support of the proposals, and I support them, you know, 100%. There is some concerns that arise from members of different political parties, for example, including the Labour Party, and there is some detail that needs to be worked out. But the proposals for reform and, you know, to increase to 96 members is something that will be benefit to the people of Wales. And the important thing, you know, I'm not a member of the Welsh Government. I'm a member of the governing party, and as a backbencher, you know, I want to see better scrutiny of my own government as well, because that's where policy improves people's lives. And I think this proposal, or these proposals that we're talking about here, does offer that. And in the background of all this, you know, we've had some opposition from Conservative members in Wales and others. Well, we constantly see, don't we, the UK Conservative government appoint friends, essentially, to the House of Lords, and no one says a thing about that. So, you know, this is about strengthening our Parliament. It's also about making our Parliament more diverse, and that's from a range of, you know, different angles where we can see. And this, obviously, I want to see a more diverse Senedd in every single sense, but I also believe the background where you're coming from, for example, I want to see more people from industry, like me, or from different industries, of course, enter politics, and this proposal in front of us gives us the opportunity to do that.
Great. Well, you mentioned the scrutiny there of the Welsh Government. Before we wrap up, just to be good to hear a bit about your role. You're chair of the Petition Committee in the Senedd. What does that do? What have you been doing with that role? And what have you been able to pursue in that capacity?
Yeah, it's a fantastic committee. I'm quite biased. I say it's the best committee, scrutiny committee of the Senedd or Welsh Parliament, and that's simply because we speak about issues that the people of Wales want us to speak about. The agenda is set by the people of Wales who sign and submit these different petitions. We've done lots of work at the moment. I've just been reading an email, actually. We've one of the first debates I led as chair of the committee was something that we took forward in the previous Senedd when I sat on the committee, and that was to do with supporting those who've suffered bereavement. And on the 12th of August, I believe, just next month, there is going to be a launch of that bereavement support, that pathway that was the petition called for. That's a fantastic achievement, something that the petition committee help with. I think the line in the email, in the first paragraph, is this all started with a petition. Now that's not successful, and I think we're going to find it very difficult to find one. Again, we mentioned earlier universal basic income, and my personal role as a member of the Senedd and an activist within the party on what I wanted to bring forward there. But when those proposals, original proposals, came forward from Welsh Government, there was a petition that was submitted to my committee, and we took evidence on that petition. It was calling for an increased universal basic income pilot, and I think because of the committee, we secured that. So the pilot went from 250 participants to 500. Evaluation was talked about heavily. There is going to be an evaluation programme, and that's going to be a huge part of the pilot. And again, let's just go back to the significance of the funding to these individuals. £1,600 a month. That's the largest sum of money for a basic income trial of its sort that I've certainly seen as a pilot. So that's something we should be proud of. And where we're looking to at the moment, we're currently taking evidence about a 4-day working week trial in Wales. So these are all bold proposals, but they're also really important. Just to mention one other area, because I think what the committee does well in scrutinising governments, we've seen a decision taken by Public Health Wales in the end of the last year towards the beginning of this year. And in January, I think they set out a tweet announcing changes to the cervical screening programme in Wales. We saw 30,000 signatures within 3 days. I took the decision with my clerks in conversation with the lead petitioner to stop that petition and let's get it debated as soon as we're back in Parliament, because we're all about bringing the voice of the people of Wales to their heart of the Welsh democracy, and the heart of Welsh democracy is on the floor of the Senedd. And certainly our job as a cross-party committee, because it is a cross-party committee, we have members from the Conservative benches and we have members from Plaid Cymru and we have members from Welsh Labour. Our job is to scrutinise people on behalf of Wales, and of course the issues that mean a lot to them. It's a fascinating committee actually, and I'm very lucky to meet some really inspirational people along that journey as well.
Great. Well, I think we'll almost have to wrap up here, but I did want to ask a bit of a fun final question. So in perhaps 30 seconds or so, who's your political hero and why?
My political hero, well, I look back to where this started for me. My political hero is my granddad, my mum's dad. He was never elected politician. He was a huge activist within the party and the trade union movement. And I think here's the lessons he taught me about standing shoulder to shoulder, standing in solidarity with others. But the big lesson he taught me was look after your neighbour, no matter who they are. And one day, if you need looking after, they will look after you as well. And if they don't, you're still doing the right thing by looking after them. And I think that is the traditional values of the Labour Party. It's what I've been brought up in. It's what I believe in. It's what I'm hopefully doing in my time as an elected member. So it might be a slightly corny answer, but that's I hope I'm doing him proud, because that's what he brought us up on, and that's what we like to do in Wales.
That's great. Well, thanks, Jack. I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks for taking time out to join us. I found it really interesting discussion. We've not spoken before, but I think there's lots to learn from how we've been winning elections, the policy ideas being put forward, some of the constitutional changes that will be coming forward. So I think there's a lot to learn, and hopefully others who are outside of Welsh Labour will pick up something from this discussion. So thanks again for joining us. We'll hope to have a RISE event sometime soon.
Well, diolch yn fawr, and I look forward to that, and certainly will, because just what I should say finally as well, we don't have all the ideas, and it is in discussions with like-minded people where we do get those range of ideas. So very happy to come to future events and have those discussions with like-minded people, perhaps over a pint, which would be a wonderful idea.
That'd be great. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Cheers.